In Ontario, we have something called the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. So there's slightly different systems for Northern and Southern Ontario because the types of wetlands you find in the boreal, shield, bog systems are very different. And if you want to build near a wetland, you need to assess the wetland using this system. So people pay money to get this evaluation system certification. And it gives points based on 4 components. So you should know these 4 components. Why did it come and go again? Okay, I've got another slide. We'll go through all 4 of them. It's biological, social, hydrological, and special features. Each one is worth 250 points. And if you get more than 600 points, you have a provincially significant wetland, and you can protect it against building and construction to some degree. There are situations where they can break those rules, but I'll explain them a little bit more. So here is the map. Everything south of that line uses the Southern Ontario system. So one second, let me get out my pointer again. What I mean is this line. This line here, all of this down here is mostly dominated by limestone soils, and they use the Southern evaluation system. So in Southern Ontario, true bogs are almost non-existent and fens are rare. But here we have shield, and here you get more bogs and fens. And then north of this, you're looking at mostly boreal style forests. So they're not bothering to see if they're provincially significant because it's very few cities and almost all wetlands. So in like Southern Ontario, it's mostly humans and very few wetlands. So evaluating whether they're provincially significant or not matters. But north of this line, it's less important. Rarely do these wetlands become provincially significant because there's so many wetlands up in here. Whether you agree with that is another story, but that's how the system is working currently. So if you were to take the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System, which I teach, by the way, right now I think Nipissing is trying to get it so that students can take it and get university credit. That is a question I'm going to have to ask Dave Hackett and get back to you guys to know if we succeeded in that, because that could be a summer course you take. We offer it the last 2 weeks of June every year. Not this year because of COVID, but most years. It's a 1-week intensive course, and we learn a lot. So once you get this certification, so if you're a consultant, the first thing you're going to do when you're assessing a wetland is get all the background data. Your boss is not going to let you go out into that wetland and spend a week in that wetland. You're going to do most of the information gathering ahead of time sitting in your office. So you're going to learn as much as you can about that wetland. If it has a name, if it, where is it, what's the administrative reason, who are the people you need to talk to? Do you need to talk to a conservation authority? Do you need to talk to an M&R office? Do you need to talk to a city bylaw committee? Who do you need to talk to? What is the exact address? What's the concession? What's the township? What's the UTM coordinates? What's the longitude and latitude? Then you're going to look at GPS mapping, and you're going to map out the size. And based on imagery, you're going to try and map out the wetland boundary as well. Based on aerial photography, can you tell where the wetland species start and end? So that's part of the course, which is pretty cool, is looking at aerial photography and interpreting it, but we're not going to deal with that today. So this is an example of a wetland. So this is our 2-meter water line. We're looking down at a bay on a lake. This is a big lake. This is all upland, and this is the bay and the lake. So in that bay, we now have a wetland. So our wetland is going to start where we see that transition from upland plants to wetland plants. And where we see that transition of plants, there will probably be a transition of soil and water inundation. And it will go out until we hit the 2-meter depth line. we will not assess wetlands deeper than 2 meters. Unless sometimes you'll like see this little pocket out here where it's like a patch of cattails, you might assess that depending on how large it is. And then within this bay, we are subdividing it into plant communities. So they've drawn a line on their map based on aerial photography. This is H for hardwood. This is a deciduous swamp. So it's dominated by hardwood species. TS is tall shrub. RE is robust emergence, so things like cattails. And then SU is submerged. Oh, so you're getting bladderwort and milfoil, lakeweed under the water. Floating plants like lilies would be an F. So before the consultant or biologist has even gone out into the wetland, they've already mapped this out. And then when they go into the wetland, they're going to double check that this is accurate. So they've chosen this is their wetland, they've mapped it out. So then they're going to check these 4 different components and try to give a score based on those components. So part of the biological score, so that's component 1, biological component, is we're learning how much biological productivity is. How many different species of plants are you finding? What species of animal can you find? So animals are a little bit more difficult because you have to go back over and over again and talk to people and find out what animals are sighted there typically, or if you can find any nests or footprints. The soil type tells you about the biological component as well, because different plants are going to grow in different soils. And we also look at connectivity to other wetlands. So does this wetland connect to another wetland? Does that now become a transport corridor for animals? So that's all part of the scoring of the biological component, so to a max of 250 points. And I'll talk a little bit about that afterwards. The second one is social component. So the social component is how it affects humans. Does this wetland have an importance to humans? So this looks at economics. So these are things that need a wetland. So not things like forestry does not depend on a wetland to function, but you cannot grow cranberries without a wetland. You cannot grow wild rice without a wetland. Certain fur bearers only live in wetlands, like beavers. So those are economic dependencies. People depend upon those things and depend upon wetlands. So does your wetland have wild cranberries that people depend upon? Things like that. And the same for recreation. These are recreational things that depend upon wetlands. So things like hiking and canoeing and skiing, you can do that anywhere. It doesn't have to have that wetland. But nature appreciation, you can argue specifically people are coming to this wetland for these specific species that can only be found in the wetland. Certain hunting, that if you're hunting species like ducks that can only be found in that wetland. So you need to do a bit of research to find out, are people using this space? And then in our social, we also look at how distinct that wetland is. Is it the only wetland like that in the area? How human disturbed is it? Are people visiting it regularly? Is there facilities there that people can use? This is why a lot of wetlands will put up interpretive signs, because then they can argue that there is educational facilities there. Are people using that wetland for research? Like our class goes into Laurier Woods and does our transit lines there usually. This year, not so much, but that's something that Laurier Woods can use to continue adding points to their provincially significant point system. And then if there's any cultural historic significance to that area. The third component is hydrological component. So this is water. So these ones are important to the environment, but also important to humans, because wetlands are going to hold water, flood attenuation. A wetland that is upstream from a community is super important because we need that wetland to hold back that water during times of flooding. So we want these upstream detention water holding areas. We also want groundwater recharge. A wetland that slows down the flow of water, like a fen or a bog, is going to be really important for recharging groundwater. And then shoreline erosion, wetlands along lakes and rivers are stopping that shoreline from eroding. These are important components, all get special points. And then our fourth one is special features. So these are interesting things that are above and beyond the other three components. So if your wetland is not particularly important, but it's the only bog in your area, then typically bogs don't get a lot of points because there's thousands of bogs in Northern Ontario. But if you have a bog in Southern Ontario, that's super rare. That gives it extra points. Any endangered species fit in special features above and beyond the other rules. Certain species trump everything. Certain species are like automatic provincially significant. And then we have provincially significant species. So they're not endangered, but we recognize that they're important to our ecosystems. So I don't need you guys to know all of these things, but I want you to know those four components and a little bit about why they're important. So biological, social, hydrological special features. So biological is looking at the species diversity that's there. Social is looking at the human impact and the impact the wetland has on humans. Hydrological is looking at water flow, and special features are looking at the rarity of the wetland, endangered species in the wetland, and other endangered habitats that might be around. So when we add all those up, do you have more than 600 points? Then you have a protected wetland. And so that's super important. So when we're looking, you guys, I'm going to send you out to assess some wetlands around you. And I don't want you to do this because this takes a lot of time. Like, people spend a whole year assessing a wetland, doing all the background like research. But part of that is doing an assessment of the plant communities there. So we're going to do in your lab, you're going to look at the plant communities. So knowing if you're in Southern Ontario, your local wetland might already be assessed. That might be something you might be able to look up and find out if it's already provincially significant. So I want to give you an idea of like the work that goes into this. So like if you're scoring, there's a score for what type of wetland it is. Marshes have a ton of nutrients and diversity, so they get a score of 15. Bogs tend to be very nutrient poor and species poor, so it only has a score of 3. Wetland types, same idea. Your more diverse wetlands get higher points, like an isolated bog only gets 1 point, for example. Human disturbance, if there's very little human disturbance, higher points than wetlands that are already highly degraded. This is just like, since you guys can see me, I'm not used to recording PowerPoints where you guys can see me. This is the book. All these scoring systems are coming out of this giant book. There's so many points that you have to go through. It's pages. And I've just pulled out some of the more straightforward and interesting ones. But to do this properly would take days. And we have, like, typically I'm teaching this in a 2-hour lab. So we're not doing the whole thing. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what it's like. One day you might take the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. One day you might be a consultant and your boss sends you to take this course so that you can evaluate a wetland. And at that time, you won't be as far behind. Some people, they come in and it's like, this is so much knowledge to take in. But you guys, you'll already have it, like, you're like, yeah, I know I got this. So one of the scoring is looking at the number of plant forms and the diversity. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a line transect through a wetland, and we're going to assess the number of plant forms and the species diversity that we have. So this is the scoring for it, total number of communities and plant forms. We're not going to go through what that means because that's a whole nother lecture. But what it means, instead of looking at trying to ID all the different species, because that is an entire job, just trying to figure out collecting species and IDing them, they look at forms. So we're looking at plant forms rather than plant species. So instead of trying to ID all the different tree species, we're noticing that you have hardwood trees or broadleaf deciduous trees, or you have coniferous trees. So do you have a deciduous swamp or a conifer swamp? And H for hardwood deciduous trees is C for coniferous. They're recognizing dead trees as a separate plant form. Do you have tall shrubs like alders that are between 1 and 6 feet? So anything higher than 6 feet is a tree. Anything higher than 1 meter and lower than, or not 6 feet, 6 meters. Metric, Oriana. Anything taller than 6 meters is a tree. Anything lower than 6 meters but taller than 1 meter is a tall shrub. Anything lower than 1 meter is a low shrub. Ground cover are all of the herbs on the ground. So all of the asters and ferns and things that grow on flowering plants that grow on the surface of the ground. Then we also have narrow leaf emergence, broadleaf emergence, and robust emergence. Narrow leaf emergence are all of the graminoids, all the grasses and sedges, minus a few robust emergence, like cattails and woolly grass is a sedge that's in a robust emergence. There's a list of only like 4 or 5 of them that if they're there year-round and they're creating habitat year-round, it's probably a robust emergent. If you're seeing them pop up above the snow, robust emergent. Broadleaf emergent, again, there's very few of these. There are arrowheads, water arum, there's very few. And then we have our floating plants. So free floating like duckweed, floating plants that have roots, like water lilies, and then submergent plants like milfoil or bladderwort, that lake weed that you're seeing under the water. So those are all the forms. I think I'm going to go through them again in lab, but I think for now this has already gone on long enough. I think this is enough content to give you an idea of what a wetland is. So I'm going to put a little quiz up on Blackboard, and it's going to cover some of the content from this lecture, just to help, because we're not getting these class discussions, just to help you go through this PowerPoint, go through some of the content I've put on Blackboard, and then take the quiz. It's going to be mostly on this content about the wetland site types and the wetland types themselves, and about those classification, those 4 components. So to give you a little bit about that to help cement it in your brain. And with that, I think I might end this lecture for today. Thank you for joining me.